I'm not just some attorney coming in trying to tell you how to do your job. I'm an attorney that used to do your job. and I,
Right.
anything I'm asking for, I don't go in demanding that every child goes to a non-public placement because that's not
Mhm.
realistic. I come in asking for realistic things and always have the support
Mhm.
because I know how to read the IEPs. I know how to read the history. I know how to read the psychological reports and pull what we need to get what my clients want for their child.
Welcome to Divorce Diaries, where attorney Carrie Jacobson brings you real stories, hard truths, and practical advice on navigating divorce and family law. Whether you're going through it, considering it, or just curious, this is your place for clarity, confidence, and resilience.
Welcome back to Divorce Diaries Lessons from the Trenches, the podcast where we dive deep into complex world of divorce, co-parenting, and everything in between, giving you tools to navigate life's toughest transitions with more confidence and less chaos. I'm your host, Carrie Jacobson, and today we're talking about something that's incredibly important for parents of children with special needs: how to advocate for your child's education during and after a divorce. Joining me today is Frances Shefter, an education attorney and advocate who has dedicated her life to helping families ensure that children get the support that they need at school. Frances started her career in the classroom as a teacher, became a special education coordinator, and ultimately realized she can make a bigger impact through the legal system. After earning her law degree with a concentration in advocacy, she founded Shefter Law, where she and her team help families have a stress-free IEP experience. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Frances, for joining us today.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's good to see you. It's been a while since we've connected.
I know.
I'd love for you to start by telling our listeners kind of, from the beginning, what inspired you to transition from teaching to becoming an attorney helping children in education.
So, I had been a teacher that was my whole career at the beginning. And I loved teaching. I loved the kids, but it's not about the kids and it's not about teaching because there's all the other background stuff going on. And I was at an elementary school. It was fabulous. And then I moved counties to an alternative middle and high school. And I loved the kids, but again, it wasn't about the kids.
Right.
Put me in a classroom with my children and let me do my thing. I'll be fine. But that reality check, it doesn't happen. And, my story is a little funny because I never said I'm going to go to law school. I kind of said, I think I'm going to take the LSATs and see what happens. And
Right.
then, and then my friend's like, oh, well, you have to take Kaplan. All right, fine, I'll take Kaplan. And, the series of events. And then all of a sudden I get this acceptance letter. I'm like, I'm going to law school. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm actually going to law school, kind of one of those. And then, of course, it made sense to combine my two careers because, I bring something different to the IEP table as an attorney because I've been on the other side. I've been the regular ed teacher. I've been the special ed teacher. I've been the coordinator. I've also been the mom and now the attorney as well. So it definitely brings something different to the table for everyone.
And how does all of those experiences combined help you advocate for your clients and their kids?
So it helps me because I shouldn't say I'm never adversarial. I never start adversarially. I go in and I connect with the teachers. I speak their language. And I'll tell them, like, usually at the beginning, if they don't know me, I'll tell them my background. And
Right.
just to be like, you know what? I'm not just some attorney coming in trying to tell you how to do your job. I'm an attorney that used to do your job. and I,
Right.
anything I'm asking for, I don't go in demanding that every child goes to a non-public placement because that's not realistic. I come in asking for realistic things and always have the support because I know how to read the IEPs. I know how to read the history. I know how to read the psychological reports and pull what we need to get what my clients want for their child.
That makes a lot of sense. And do you find that the teachers have a different reception to you because you've been on their side?
Definitely, 100%. I see there's been so many times I've been in IEP meetings, or even whether they're virtual or when they were in person. And once I say my background, everybody just kind of like, you see this sigh of relief,
Right.
because, and we all have our own styles as attorneys, as you know, but there's no reason to start out adversarial, yeah, there's a reason our client hired us because they're not getting their voice across. But as an attorney, we can still come in to get our client's voice across, and they'll listen to us more, but in a respectful way. That's not like, I'll never say, well, you teacher aren't doing this. I'll be like, well, I'm sure you're doing it in the classroom. Let's pull it out. Like, what exactly do you do here? And now let's get it in the IEP.
Right.
Which is always, like when you come in accusing somebody, they're not going to take it.
Absolutely. Now, I know you've coined the phrase stress-free IEP. Can you explain to our listeners what that is and how your firm helps the parents through what is so often that stressful process?
Yes, definitely. Like a lot of people, like, there's no such thing as a stress-free IEP. I'm like, I get it 100%. I stress at my own daughter's IEP meetings, but where it came from is that we take the stress for you. And that's the hope. My team and I, we understand what's going on. We know it. We're that extra pair of ears for you so that you as the parent can just be the parent. You don't have to worry about it. What we like to tell all of our clients at the IEP meeting, before the IEP meetings, we're like, look, at the IEP meeting, say whatever you feel, however you want to do it. It's all good. There's nothing you can say in an IEP meeting that we can't say. What my client is trying to say is, and put it in that terminology that we need. So it's just, it's, you don't have to stress. We will stress for you. We've got you. We've got your back. And it's just calming to know that I don't have to remember everything. And I don't have, as a parent, I don't have to remember everything. I don't have to listen to everything. I don't have to ask all the questions. Like, somebody else is there. So that's what it's about.
Now, as you know, so many of our listeners are going through or have gone through a divorce or a separation, and some of them have, children who have special needs. How can a divorce or separation impact a child's IEP or 504 plan?
So directly it doesn't, but indirectly, obviously it does. Both parents still maintain educational decision-making rights unless for some reason there's, sole custody or sole legal custody. But the couple of things that I say for people that are going through the divorce is if you're doing it as a mediation agreement or just, as an agreement in itself, to make sure you have that one has decision-making, has tie-breaking authority.
Okay.
Because what happens is if you have two parents that are coming in and both have 50-50 in legal rights and they completely disagree, what do you do? The school's not going to pick one over the other. The school's just kind of going to be like, I'm out. I don't know what else to do. So that's something that's important, that you make sure that one has decision-making, or talk through what you guys want for the kid in advance so that you're in that place that you don't have the disagreement. That's one thing. And then the other thing is to think about before getting divorced is your residency. And I've had that issue often with enrollment in the school system, because if one moves to another county, there could be that issue there. So it's just those things to think about. Like, I know divorce is hard and you're not in that co-parenting mindset always, but you got to think about it. You got to put your child first and really think about, what do we want for our child educationally?
Right.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners, it is possible to have tie-breaking authority just on one particular issue, such as education, or to specify that if you have joint legal custody and you can't come to an agreement, that they can come back to mediation to try to resolve that particular issue before something else is dealt with. And the 50-50, physical custody is something that I have dealt with as well, when you've got parents that move, after you've separated, and unless you specify where the child is going to go to school, it can be a
Yeah.
battle of which jurisdiction the child is going to enroll in.
Right. Exactly. And especially if they're in different counties or even different states, it's challenging, because I've had situations where the schools have said, well, wait a minute, they don't live in our district anymore. They can't attend school here anymore. When it's like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Parents are separated. One is living in DC and one is living in Maryland. Here's all the proof. The child bounces back and forth, like depending, they're co-parenting nicely together. Here's all the documentation that they're still maintaining the Bethesda address or the Maryland address. And and this is why. And so you provide all that proof, and then the school system's like, oh, okay. But it's one of those things that you have to know in advance to remember that you might have to prove it again.
Right. And it is a simple thing to include in an agreement. If this is going to become an issue, simply saying, the parties or the parents agree that the child is going to continue to be enrolled in schools in X county, so that there aren't issues or disputes about it later.
Right. Yeah. And it's so important, because, some counties are, all counties have their own little special ways,
Right.
and what they want. And, a lot of times, I've had it even in the same county that parents, one is at one address and one is at the other address in different schools, in boundary schools, and which, thankfully in that situation, both parents agreed on that stuff. So it wasn't a big deal. But I've also had situations where, mom has one attorney and dad has another attorney. Like, we got the two education attorneys kind of litigating together. It's a little weird, because, it just, to me, I don't want to say it's a waste of family resources, but it kind of is. Like, you guys need to get on the same page here. I know you don't get along, whatever, but don't put the kids in the middle,
Yeah. And that's something that we really do try to work with our clients on, to the extent that is possible, for sure.
Yeah.
Do the schools handle IEP meetings any differently when the parents are divorced or are in conflict about their children's needs? Like,
I've had, the annual review IEP meeting is the annual review. I have always had difficulty with, they're not always notifying both parents. But they have to legally. The problem is their system's not set up to have like two different primaries. But in general, they don't hold them differently. They still do the same. I have had them have separate meetings because of parents that couldn't be in the same room. And then the problem is like, if there are disagreements, generally there haven't been, so it's not, but schools they're not gonna get involved. They're gonna be like, go back to your lawyer, like this is the court order. Their legal's gonna advise them, like, you gotta treat them both the same. So they don't. It's always interesting when you have two divorced parents that start fighting in the middle of an IEP meeting. And it's like, guys, stop. But the school's going to focus on what's important for the child and what's best for the child, or at least what they think it is. So things should not change just because there's a divorce.
Absolutely. Is there any advice that you would give co-parents that may not agree? Like, other than, the couple of things that we talked about before, having a tie breaking, and putting in the agreement, which county is going to be the jurisdiction that the kids are going to participate in. Any other tips on how to keep the kids out of the middle of such a already stressful situation?
Yeah. That's $1 million question for everything, right? It's, remember that to focus on the child, if you need to, if you're both disagreeing, agree to maybe hire an educational consultant. Agree to maybe go to someone, like I know someone that used to be he's a mediator still, but he also just gives a place for parents to talk so they
Right.
can talk through what's going on and not necessarily help you decide what's better, but help you let each other be heard and
Hmm.
gives you that platform. Whereas an educational consultant or an advocate could help, like looking at the documents and being like, look, I agree with mom or I agree with dad. Like, this is what I see, and
Right.
can help you make that decision that way. Um, because the last thing our kids need is our parents fighting and being stuck in the middle of what's
Yeah.
right. And I know it's hard, emotions are high, but it's like, at least for this little minute, let's put
Yeah.
everything else aside and talk about our child and what's best
Well,
for our child.
especially because it impacts the child's overall school experience
Yeah.
and how they're able to thrive in that
Right.
environment.
And impacts their life in
Right.
whole, because if they're not getting what they need in school, or they're getting one thing and not another, that's going to impact how they grow up and how they get services or where they go in the future.
Yeah. Let's talk about legal protections. What are some common mistakes or misconceptions that parents make when they are advocating for their child's education, especially, during a situation where they may be separating or divorcing?
I mean, the common mistakes that parents make is and I don't want to say they trust the school is a mistake, but they put it all in. The teachers know best. They know what they're talking about. They know what's available. I always say educate yourself. Education
Mhm.
is power. To know. I also say that when parents don't trust their gut, that is such a big mistake. Like,
Yeah.
we know, moms and dads know, we get that feeling and something's not right. Guess what? 99.9% of the time, something's not right,
Right.
and so research it, Google, whatever it is, find what's best for your child. And also remember that you're just as important as everybody else at that table.
Hmm.
You know your child best. Everybody else, yeah, they might have degrees and all that other stuff, but they haven't been with the child since birth. They
Right.
haven't seen that. And so it's trust yourself, and give yourself grace and give yourself the space to be able to assert what you want for your child, is the biggest thing.
Are there any professionals that you regularly recommend parents to consult with, whether it's um, advocates such as yourself, or if it is mental health providers, anything along those lines that you recommend to your clients, or does it just kind of depend on the particular situation?
No, I definitely have ones that I've used before, like for when we're getting to the point of due process. I use Weinfeld Group a lot out in
Okay.
Maryland, and they're advocates to be the expert witnesses.
Hmm.
When it comes to testing, Ken Stefano, Rebecca Resnick, um, Ryan Hinoja. I always get his name wrong. There's a lot of people that I'll recommend, that I like because their reports are thorough. Stixrud Group. The person I was mentioning before, the mediator that really gives the space. And what's great about him is he's a father of 3 neurodiverse
Right.
kids. So he lives it too, as that's Eric Feig with Feig Mediation.
Yep.
Yeah, he's great. There are different some. What I do, just to let your listeners know, is like, if they're like, hey, we need a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, they can call my office, and whoever they talk to, whether it's Shane or Kevin, they can run a report and send them a list of all of them.
Oh, wonderful.
So I have that system that I keep everybody, and they just put in the keywords, and they can send listeners, because I like to, it's all about building our community, building our family, and helping
Absolutely.
each other.
And
Yeah.
it's also helpful to have professionals that we know are going to be helpful, um,
Mhm.
for our clients in their particular situations.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. For those parents who are just beginning the IEP process, and especially, those who may be going through a separation or divorce, what are some of the first steps that they should take to ensure that their child's needs are being met?
Educate yourself. I mean, that's always the biggest thing. The first steps is, find groups, find parent groups.
Mhm.
Parents with special needs kids were, definitely a different group. We are just always supportive and always there and always happy to help other parents. And I say we because both my kids, as I said, are neurodiverse. But like what's available and what options are there so that you can help decide what your child needs. So, I mean, that's always my biggest thing is educate yourself,
Yeah.
however you need to do it, however you choose to do it, YouTube channels, TikTok,
Mhm.
listening to podcasts, but like know what's available. And yes, it's extremely overwhelming and it's a lot, but that's where parent groups like, hey, I just got this new diagnosis of autism. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? And the moms and dads will help you, like, hey, this is a great group or join this group, and help you navigate and figure out your ways.
Yeah. I do think that, in this era of social media, it is such a great place to brainstorm and to get
Yeah.
those recommendations, because I don't know what we used to do
I
before we
know.
would be able to ask, like,
Yeah.
thousands upon thousands of people at one time, who should I use for this?
Right.
It does make it so much easier.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's just like, I mean, and Chat GPT, like people are like, well, what do you do with this? What of that? I'm like, look, I'll take the present levels and be like, does this tell you everything you need to know? And cut and paste it into Chat GPT. Or I'll take a goal and it like doesn't sit right. Like something's not
Mhm.
right. And like make sure this goal is a SMART goal, smart, specific, measurable, achievable, time,
Right.
and that I'm spacing on the other one. But and ChatGPT is phenomenal. I mean, they're not perfect. You need to know what you're looking at and what you're doing, but it's definitely something you can use as a tool to help you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you share a success story, obviously keeping it anonymous, where one of your families came to you feeling overwhelmed, but through your guidance were able to secure the right educational support for their child?
One of the ones I love is that when schools try to say kids are not eligible,
Mhm.
because they're saying, oh, well, the kid's getting straight A's is on grade level. So they're not eligible for services. Which with our kids on the spectrum, autism, and especially with, PDA, um, persistent demand avoidance, they are all on grade level, but the problem is they're not in the classroom 50% of the time or more. And that's where the they're not accessing the general education curriculum. And so there's been several times now that I've been able to go in and explain to the school that this is not an exclusionary factor just because they're on grade level, just because they are, acing everything doesn't mean that they're not eligible, that their 100% goals can be on social emotional. There doesn't have to be academic goals. Educational, right? Educational
Yeah.
impact is not just bad grades and not performing well. It's
Right.
you're not accessing the general education curriculum. If you're not in your classroom for 50% of the day or even 20% of the day, you're not accessing the curriculum. So the couple of times that I've gone into the school system and been able to convince the school that this child is eligible and needs an IEP, like those are the best. Those are the ones that like are like those are what we need.
And I think that is, as someone who is not, an education attorney and does not have a special needs child, but that is kind of my conception, is that most schools won't take steps for providing services if the child is doing well. So it's interesting to know that they can actually receive services because there's still something that's happening
Right.
that can be addressed.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's one final piece of advice that you would give any parent listening today who feels lost or alone in the process of advocating for their child with special needs?
Build your community.
Yeah.
It's so important. Lean on others that have done it. It's such a lonely process wherever you are, whether, you're in the process of divorce, you've already divorced, whether you get along or don't get along. Just being a parent of a special needs child can be very lonely because unless you're a parent of a special needs child, you don't always get it, no matter how much our friends want to. It's just, it's different. And build your community, find your support system, lean on your support system. You can't be there 100% for your child and advocate the best for your child if you're not taking care of yourself first.
100%. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here, Frances. Your incredible work that you do for families is so inspiring. For our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Frances and how she helps families with that stress-free IEP experience, check out the notes for our show today, and you'll have a link for her website. As always, thanks for joining Divorce Diaries. If you found today's episode helpful, please be sure to subscribe and share it with a friend. Until next time.
Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Divorce Diaries. Remember, every journey is unique, but you don't have to navigate it alone. Visit jacobsonfamilylaw.com or call 443-726-4912 for support and guidance.